Hi, I'm Trent Robinson, coach of the Sydney Roosters. Privileged to sit here and talk with Mark Bouris on Straight Talk. You're okay with that? Do you want me to do it again? Or? Mark and I talk deeply about spirituality, also gush a bit about Cooper Cronk, and we talk a lot about the Roosters and about developing men. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
Robbo, how you going, mate?
Good, Mark.
Very
how are
good.
you?
Good. I'm actually very pleased to get someone of your ilk into sitting here on the lounge with me because I want to talk to you about. I'm on the board of the Roosters, and you're our head coach of the club, and you've been there for a number of years. But I've never really had a long, deep, and meaningful conversation with you. That's what I intend to do today. I hope you don't mind.
We spend lots of time and lots of big moments over the last 9 years now, but it's good to dig in and sit down and have a conversation for an hour about stuff that's important.
Yeah, I want to get into the weeds a little bit, dig into the weeds a bit, and I think it's important. People out there in business want to listen to people like yourself who run a football club effectively, a very successful football team, and they want to find out what your secrets are. They want to know who you are and what makes you up, so that they may be able to take a little bit of that away and apply it to their own lives. So I guess the best place to start for me then is Trent Robinson as a young guy. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Camden, out the back of Camden, a couple of different places. Cawdor, I was born into, a little place out the back, on a horse stud, then out to the Oaks and then into Camden, but all of it centred around there, and Catholic upbringing and the sport on the weekends, and the usual middle class Australian lifestyle.
So what's your dad do and what's your mum do?
So mum was a PE teacher, so she went through high school PE teaching. Met my dad. He was from North Sydney. Mum was from Riverwood.
Riverwood, I grew up there.
Yeah.
Which is around the suburb next to me.
Yeah, so mum, that's where I spent the weekends going to my grandparents, lived in the same house in Riverwood. Dad was a dreamer and an entrepreneur type, so I'd spent my time going around to the shows and to the Bonds factory out at Liverpool, and all the screen printing.
Yep.
Those T-shirts.
Became a big thing back then.
Yeah, and then the transfers, used to have that big machine we used to iron on the transfers and peel it off. That was their business for a long period of time. They lost that business, and mum and dad split up, and when I was quite young, when I was 7, and mum went back to PE teaching and swimming teaching. So she did that a whole life and retired maybe 2 years ago.
So were you mostly raised by your mum? Or was one of those share arrangements, or mostly your mum? You
lived with mum, and every second weekend went to dad's place.
Yeah, because I brought one of my sons up that way. In those days, you'd had every second weekend.
Yep.
He'd come to my place, and then the rest of the time, though, he'd spend with his mum. These days, it's much more equitable, and you actually share the children, probably half and half if you can.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters?
I know an older brother,
yep.
Dean, and there was just the two of us.
And then when you say you went to a Catholic school, was that St Gregory's?
Yep.
And that's a rugby league school.
Yeah, so I grew up playing soccer as a kid, cricket, swimming, soccer, and then I went to St Greg's, tried out for the under-13s. I was under-12s, missed out in year 7 and played soccer again. Because when you went to St Greg's, there was those mythical guys that played. They were your world back then. The NRL or the New South Wales Rugby League back then was too far away. No, I never met any first grade players when I was growing up, but the high school stars were the ones. Your Jason Taylors and those guys. So yeah, and then I started playing in year 8. So I caught the bug, and Daniel Anderson was my first football coach.
Wow.
Who is now head of recruitment at the Roosters and coached Warriors and Parramatta and St Helens. So he was my first football coach at under-13s and my maths teacher.
And because I was just thinking, as you said, about first football coaches, those people had an influence on our lives. Definitely in my life, my school teachers and one of my school teachers, a football coach, actually had an influence on my life, not so much in terms of sport, but just on my life, in terms of forming who I sort of became, or some of the things I I currently
Yeah.
do or believe in. Did Daniel Anderson have an influence on you?
He was an amazing coach for me. So on a football perspective, under 13s, that's all I knew. And sometimes when you go in, and I was blessed to have him as my coach. I had him in the under 13s and under 15s. And he coached in a way which was quite disciplined and progressive at the same time. You're allowed freedom of play, but then there was also disciplines that you played with. And it was a great way to play footy. But that's all I knew. That's how I thought everybody played. The older I got, the more I understood that my groundings as far as rugby league was concerned were laid by Daniel and were really strong. Like I felt like that was a real head start compared to other guys.
So, what was he like though? I mean, what was the interaction? Do you think he took you under his wing, so to speak, or was just what you gleaned from being in his team of him as a coach or as a person?
Yeah, he was young, so he was only maybe 22 when he was coaching us at 13. He was still playing at the time, but he was fiery, so he told it as it was, and he's always been known for that. But then he also had a humour about him that he brought out all the time. So he made us. He really pushed me, but then also, my best football at school was under him by far, and he gave me a freedom to play, but also was very disciplined on what he wanted out of me as far as the character in which what you play.
That were your school football introduction days.
Yep.
What about school as a student?
Yeah, I liked school. I loved going every day. I enjoyed a group of friends, but I also enjoyed learning. I enjoyed different subjects, and so Mum pushed really hard on. We had to go to university. That was her thing. Wasn't a big thing in our families. Not many people at all went to university in our family growing up, and that was her thing. You had to do well at school, and yeah, I enjoyed it.
Was it a push thing, or was it more that you enjoyed being studious?
Mum put it in our head often, and it wasn't a choice. It was something that we were going to do. So it wasn't as if she was pushing towards us, but it was like it was a foregone conclusion that we had to do that. So therefore, we had to work towards it.
That's your fate.
Yep.
That's your destiny.
Yeah.
It's already written out for you.
Yep.
And then, so how did you do at school?
Pretty good.
I heard you did very well at St. Greg's. Like, do you want to expand on that? Like, were you one of the top students?
No, look, I really enjoyed school. Sort of topped one of the subjects at school, and then also, did well in others, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning. I loved it. The thing I liked about our school, which I think it's common in some of the schools where sport and education went hand in hand. It was cool to do well at school and do well at sport.
Yeah.
And I loved that environment. I thought that was really key, which I know is not always the same in all schools. I think that sometimes we miss out on that fact that, that education and sport go hand in hand.
Well, sometimes some of the schools actually go about disassociating them. And can I ask you, just going back in that period, I guess SG Ball would have been under 15s in those days as opposed to under 19s or whatever it is today. So they had it all reversed around. But were you playing rep footy? Yeah,
so I played New South Wales 15s, but Daniel Anderson was a trainer at Parramatta at that stage. So I went and played for Parramatta in under 15s. Under 17s, Pete Mulholland was our coach. They liked him us only to play for school, so I didn't play for school. I didn't play rep at that time, and then I came to Roosters from school, so we didn't play any rep there, and then got signed by Roosters out of school.
And who was the coach? Who was our head coach then?
So Artie recruited 4 of us from the Roosters, and from St. Greg's, and Gus had just signed up to be head coach. So that was at the end of 94, start of 95.
Yeah, great era for us too.
Yeah, when Gus was taking over, and you could feel that change.
Yeah.
That mid 94 when the change happened, and Artie, I think Mark Murray got moved on, and then Gus came halfway through the year, and then that whole shift when Nick, I think, was sort of taking over,
took control
of the leagues club, like all of that shifted, because I remember the East that I liked, but that it was sort of poor old East during the late 80s and early 90s, and then to that there was a shift within 6 months, I think, of Nick taking over and Gus coming to the club, it just became this, this club, this really strong club, and it's been that way ever since.
I was going to say that they were those two things, both Gus and Nick, sort of like a titanic shift in the way our organisation, the East Club, operated from thereafter. And I think it's probably, you could go back to then as to our success now. I mean, there's lots of factors in our success now, but our success started
definitely
then. It needed to happen. I just want to go back a bit. So let's say you're 18 and you'll join our club. Did you go off to university, or did you go to do some more study? Did Mum achieve her dream?
I knew that I was coming to the Roosters when I was choosing university, so I ended up going to North Sydney, ACU at North Sydney.
Australian Catholic University?
Yep. And that was sports science. And then I did my degree whilst I was at the Roosters.
Then that's pretty rare, particularly in those days. I mean, there would have been a few people like maybe George Paponis, a few of those guys who did university at the same time as playing footy.
Yeah, there wasn't too many. A lot of people started, and then they'd often pull out after a year or two when training got hard, or they started to move up the grades.
Well, they started making money.
Yeah, that was pretty key as well.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that was really key at that time that had Ginge ended up getting me a job at Packer's gym, at Kerry's gym at Hyde Park.
Yeah,
that was that I learned as much there as I did in the footy circles about coaching and different personalities and all of that. What walked through that building.
Well, that would have been an interesting view of the world, looking who walked into the Park Street gym, because the Hyde Park gym, as it's called in those days. It's still open too, by the way, but it's not owned by the Packers anymore, obviously. But there was some interesting. I tell you a funny story about that, because when I first started talking to Kerry about investing in the wizard business, Kerry said to me, well, I don't know if I want to get involved in this business. He said, but I want you to go and talk to Bob Joss.
Yep.
And Bob Joss was the boss of Westpac. And Bob Joss had a locker in the Hyde Park gym. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember Bob used to come in.
And Kerry said, you've got to go meet the bloke.
Yeah.
And he said, if Bob Joss thinks it's worth investing, or I should get involved in this business, then I'm going to have a good look at it. So I had to pass muster for the Bob. So I had to go and meet him down the gym. And then I had to go meet him in his office half a dozen times. And he was an unbelievably good bloke. He was a gentleman, complete gentleman. But Kerry trusted him implicitly. Bear in mind, Kerry, just prior to that, actually owned 10 or 11% of Westpac. I don't know if there was a crossover between Bob Joss being in Kerry's gym at the same time. Hopefully not. But I do remember that Kerry at one stage had aspirations of controlling Westpac in a big way.
Yeah, right.
And then, but that was my same. So they're the sorts of people, for those people listening to this, they're the sorts of people who went through that gym. But there was
I remember Bob coming in. He was, consistent. The days that he trained, came in the morning, quiet, humble man, did his training, walked out, went to work, went to Westpac, and then you'd see on a, television that night or something, you'd see him, talking about banking industry or something. But that was a snapshot of lots of different people that walked through that gym at different times. And then you had to deal with all these different people. But it was also a relaxed environment. There was quite a vibe there about the Hyde Park Club. And so the way that people interacted there was unique too. It was a gym, but it was also a club, a true club with a bar and restaurant and all of that at that time. So it was amazing to mix with all these people as a 18, 19, 20-year-old in Sydney.
A kid from Campbelltown and thrown into the middle of that. That's a big awakening. That's a big change. It's sort of character building to some extent, or helps to build your character. I mean, I'm going to talk about this later, but you deal with young men today who, at our club for that matter, sort of a lot of people go through the turnstiles of our club who our young men are exposed to at the age of 18, 19, 20, 21. You're probably a great person to be able to guide them through those same experiences that you had back then. But before I get on, I just want to peel back a bit. You don't realise this, and I've never really told you this, but for me and a number of my colleagues, now I'm talking about at the East and other places, we revere Trent Robinson in terms of his coaching ability, but also his intellect, etc. Like there's it's not just a legend; it's actually the truth. And you're a much younger man than any of us, the ones I'm talking about, but we think your ability to think and coach is quite legendary in our lifetime, for that matter. And so I'm trying to find out the things that influenced you in your life. So if I peel back a bit and I go back to when you're a young man and you're at Campbelltown at school at St Greg's and you're going to year 7 and your mum and dad weren't together because, they split up when you were 7 or 8 or whatever the age was. What was your interaction? What do you think you got from your dad and what did you learn from your mum? What are the influences you got from both of them that have taken you into your life today?
Yeah, I've reflected on, I guess the older you get, the more that you reflect on. You spend most of your early years trying to reject everything about your parents and trying to be yourself, and then the older you get, you realise that the subconscious plans that you end up expressing a lot of traits of those people that you spent a lot of time with when you were young. So Mum was extremely disciplined. So she was quite good at sport growing up. That was where the sporting bit came, and she, her world revolved around us boys. So she took us to different sports, but she was also a PE teacher and she was a teacher. If you ask a lot of people that grew up in Camden, a lot of people happens all the time that Mum taught them swimming. But Mum was firm, very disciplined. She worked multiple jobs to bring us up, but also she was very aspirational. She allowed us to dream big. There was never the negative side, which I hear sometimes, which is the negative comments that become the norm for parents. That stop progression. Mum was the opposite. Be disciplined, have integrity, but dream big. And so Mum instilled that, and then Dad was really interesting. So when Mum and Dad split up, he was on a path to find himself. So every second weekend I'd go to his place and we'd be doing a muscle testing to see what the body worked. If you've ever done the muscle testing where they put your hand, your body will tell you what nutrients you need, or what affirmations you need to do, or do past life stuff where you'd lie down and go
regress.
And go into some past life, some dream state type things. And then so there was a constant weaving of different courses, breakthrough, and it was for Dad, it was always a constant search, energy healing and chakras and healing through light and all this different thing, but it was his search for himself. It was a really important moment when I was sort of 14, 15. He was a dreamer as well, where it was once I get past this, or once I do that, then we'll be in a really good spot and something will happen for us and all of that. And I gave up on that and stopped looking for that ultimate father figure and just, I remember thinking, when I was 15, about just allowing him to do his own thing without wanting something from him, because that was important, because he wasn't in a place to give it. He was trying to find himself.
Do you get disappointed with that at any stage?
No, because I remember clearly, I did as a young guy, life will be better when this happens. Once I do this, or once I do this thing, life will be better. And then I remember going, this is not going to happen, but that's okay, because that's his story. I let that go, and we had a good relationship until he passed away. He never found that place. He never got there, because it was something external that he was looking to kickstart him. There was another course to do. There was another venture to go on. And that sort of taught me some lessons about it's inside all of us. The answer's not external, it's internal. So I thank him for that as well.
What can you explain a little bit more to that when because you saw him chasing something, you saw him hoping that something external was going to solve his problem or give him a solution to something or other.
Yeah.
But you're saying that doesn't exist. You got to find it internally. It's inside you. The exploration.
I'm going to put an asterisk here that this is my opinion, Mark, on
sure.
this. So we
are wanting to know about you though. So
So this is my bits about. So I'll go to that. The self-help section in the bookshop, right? It's full of it'll be a bookshop of its own soon. Where the way that we're going with it, right? So that
self-help
section,
bookshop,
it'll be on its own, which is good, because we do need guidance. Sometimes they guide it, but what all of them are saying to me is that there's not some course or something that is the answer. The answer is in how I walk my path, and the answers are in me. The way that I want to live or walk or be or change, the answers are inside of me, and that I have choice over that. That's the best thing about it, is I have choice about how my life looks, because it's not designed by someone else. It's not guided by some external factor. I have to guide it, and that answer is within me. And there are some help out there in those books or the podcasts or the apps that we look at, but in the end, it's just they're all mirrors looking back on ourselves. Every book that you read, whether it's a movie that we watch, it's just a mirror for us to reflect ourselves and say, what lessons did I get? Now, how am I going to walk? That's my belief.
Look at football, the thing you are expert in. It's a game of rituals. There's
Definitely.
Rituals. There's rituals everywhere.
Yep.
And it's funny, there is an alignment between sport and spiritualism. It's a secular version of spiritualism in that it's full of rituals. It's full of discovering who you are and failing and having to learn from it and live with that and get on with it and be honest with yourself and seek forgiveness and, make sure that you worked within the collective and, you're doing the right thing not in a social environment, but your environment. Sport is like a religion in some respects.
It's a good point. So I remember I was backpacking around Spain, and there was it seems like a joke, but there was a Spanish guy, an Italian guy, and myself in this room. I think we're in Portugal or in Spain. And we started talking about it openly. And the Italian guy talked about he didn't know what was out there as far as, from a spiritual sense, but he loved the ritual of his church. His thing that was important was the community aspect, and which is what you're talking about in our weekend sport, which some people find a religion. Which
I find a religion. I turn up at the Sydney Cricket Ground where we're playing at the moment. I see all the same guys. They're all dressed in the same way. We all sit in the same seats, just like you would if you go to church, like I did when I went to church on Sunday with my mum. We all sit in the same seats. We pretty much go through the same prayer process. Some say, and sometimes you'd be probably happy to hear that I am actually praying for our team. but it is ritualistic.
Yep.
It is a religious experience in some respects. I see the high priest, and I see them all. They're all there.
Well, that's what binds us. That's what I guess the bit about most Indigenous sort of cultures as well have rituals that bind a community. So that we have it in our team about how we act, how we walk in the door, and how we train, and how, like, all of those rituals that we go through, and then how we interact outside of that. But even turning up to a game is, putting your jersey on in the morning and, turning up and
what you do first. Some of your players would have rituals too.
Definitely, there's a process of familiarity with creating the same environment, because what we want to do is perform our best, create flow, whatever it is. And to do that, you want to repeat a process to put you in that state of mind. And so that's where that process or those rituals come from.
And in terms of, you said a word really important to me, and I know it's important to you, the word flow. And whenever I use the word flow, I for some reason I think the word energy's got to sit in front of it or behind it somewhere. The word energy's got to be there, and I'm talking in a sense of physics, like in a real quantitative sense, physics quantitative sense, and nearly quantifiable in that you could probably write a formula around it. And the energy point is an important point. I know you have strong views on energy, and to some extent, I think they're related to spiritualism. I think the two are interlinked. People talk about your soul, and for me, I just think it's your energy is finally escaping from your body, and that could be your soul. Just that, whoever was thinking about these things hundreds of thousands of years ago, trying to put some sense to it, didn't understand the concept of energy as such in a physics sense. But where I mean, you're a learned guy. You're always reading. I know you're a great thinker. Where do you think energy fits into everything you do now with our football team? So
the first thing we do, this is an interesting point, because you got to, How do you introduce to an 18-year-old the idea of energy when, we've walked for a long time and it's still that thing that it's hard to grasp, or it's hard to understand? So what we try and do is put it into simple terms about, people might say, how do you feel? Which is one part of it. There's a deeper part to it. But our first thing is do you understand your own energy? Can you create your energy that you need? How do you stand? Like, how do you stand as a player or as a man?
Stand, like physically stand.
Physically stand. How much energy does that, what's your presence like?
Now, someone like Jared gives off an enormous amount of energy.
Yeah. So people will say it in different ways, but that's what they're saying. And so that's understanding how to cultivate that and how to build that. Like, it's not you've got it or you don't. There's ways that people sometimes have a head start, but are you working on how your energy? Do you understand yourself? Are you getting stronger? It comes out in your character. How do you stand? Like, how does your character come out of you? You can say it in really esoterical terms, or you can say it in really simple terms. Is that man a strong man when he stands in front of you? Do you understand yourself, and can you grow that? Can you cultivate that in yourself? And then what's our collective energy? How do we move together? So the best way that we can see it is, often some people have talked about it a bit. Gus often says it in commentary where I talk about dancing together. Like, there's a dance that in defence, I love how it lives and breathes. But that's all that is guys don't have to talk. Communication is really important. But when your energy is connected in defence, verbal communication is really low, because you're bound by this movement. When someone shifts, they already know how to move with them. And that whole line, the boys know that. They know when they've got that. And if you can combine everybody's energy to dance together, that's when you're a great defensive team.
So if you're an offensive team, then can you break that energy? Can you break that down? It's like if you see an opposition team doing it, do you say, okay, I can see their energy, I can see their flow or the rhythm, the dance rhythm. This is what we've got to knock off this or this, or take something out.
Certain ways that I'll always say, look, some of our biggest moments in the last decade have been when that energy's been combined. And the guys you don't have to be spiritual to understand that. The footy players will go, yeah, I know what that's about. I can feel that. I can know what the guy's doing 2 or 3 players away, because we're all connected. That's what you call team spirit. That's what the old term about what is team spirit. That's that bond that you create in so many different ways. So when it comes to the hardest moments, that you move together, you play for each other. But then in attack, there's also that movement. How people, that sense of when someone's going to go, that some people have greater intuition than somebody else of how to be there. Tedesco's a good example of that. His intuition about, he reads energy quite well in other players as well as himself. And so he knows how to move and get into positions. And he's shown that for Tigers, Roosters, and, especially New South Wales as well, in huge moments.
It's funny because I've seen Boy Cordner break down a team by poking his head through.
Yep.
Like he sort of busts through their wall. I mean, invisible wall, but and Boyd's been famous for that, just poking his head through and sometimes getting the ball away or taking a ball on a short ball. How many tries has Boyd scored off Pearcey in the old days, and then later Cooper Cronk, and just by busting through those with those little sneaky passes that the halfbacks used to give to him.
Well, you can say it in a really in different ways, but they're the most beautiful games that we watch.
Yeah,
is when both teams are on, when both teams' energy is at their best, when all 13 players on both teams are rocking and rolling, they're all dancing together, and then you've got a game. Yeah. Now it comes to, this is what we often talk about. A lot of players will talk about, a lot of coaches or commentators will talk about, when you get a quick play the ball, this is what you can do. Well, we can all play off quick play the balls. What about off a slow one? What about when there's no space? What about when the team's opposition's at their best? Now what's your strategy? That's the best. That's where you start. That's where your strategy starts is, well, give me the best opposition, the best players and the most combined team. Now let's work on a strategy to break that down. Break the energy of that team. That's where the strategy starts.
And that's not you, though, building the strategy with the players, because you got to get the players to understand this stuff, this whole concept expressly. They must understand this. I mean, you've got to. I mean, you can't just set them out a plan and say, "Well, this is how I think we can break down the other opposition's rhythm and energy." I mean, you've got to get someone in this. At least you've got to have a half a dozen or a couple of players in the side who can understand what it is you're talking about. Am I correct?
Where it starts is the coaches do the legwork, we do the legwork, but the finishing touches are always the players. They're the most intelligent. They're the ones that are going to enact it. So it has to be in their bones. You can't tell them to do something and then they go out and do it. It has to seep through every part of their body for them to do it. So what you do is we do the legwork. We have concepts or ideas that we think we're going to put in place, and we think we're going to train them. But then you get your top players and your most instinctive players or your leaders and go, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Do you literally say that?
Definitely.
At half time? I mean, sometimes I've seen our team, our club come off and they've come back and like a steam train second half. Is that the conversation? Is that how you would say it?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you, because it's always, you've got your things that you're seeing, but they're the ones that feel everything. So a good example of that, like not at half time, but we deserved for 18 grand final when Cronk had his shoulder. Mm-hmm. So what we had to do, we had two plans if Cronk was going to play and if Cronk wasn't going to play. What I had to do with the coaches was devise an attacking plan to play without a halfback. And we're going to play, and I had some ideas about who I was going to play in that position and how we're going to play. We decided that our best players, our most instinctive players were Latrell Mitchell and Joseph Manu on top of Teddy and Keary and that. So how are we going to move them around the field rather than just planting them on the centres? And so we went into that meeting with a sort of a blueprint, but then it was over to them to go, hey, this is what I'm thinking, draw it up. We're thinking this, and I'm thinking about playing this player. And then they went, no, I reckon we should move. He won't do it. Keep him in his position. What we should do is put Robbo into that position. And Robbo said, I'll do it. And then we just tweaked a few of the things that we wanted to do. And then that was the plan for the week. It wouldn't have worked as well if the players didn't tweak it. I would have possibly would have put a different player into that halfback role than Robbo. But Robbo was the most mature to handle an hour before the game decision on whether Cooper was going to play or not. Yeah, so that you do the legwork, but the players put the finishing touches on it. They're the ones that have to execute.
So, but how do you get players? I mean, people trying to do this in business because business is always about the team. It's about the players in the team. How do you go about recruiting someone who you think one day will become one of these people that you can ask the question of, this is what I'm thinking about, what do you think? And how do you go about recruiting? I mean, you just recruited a well-known young fellow. Like, I mean, do you think to yourself, this guy's going to be someone who's going to come up with these calls, or this guy's going to be someone who's going to execute on the day? I mean, what's your process?
There's two parts to it. We're in entertainment, right? So There's two parts to it. We entertain, but we also represent a community. Roosters supporters who love watch us play, and we represent rugby league. So we've got a role to play to offer spectacle. So we want to watch them play. So we've got to buy talent. We've got to buy players that are going to be exciting to watch. That's why we go out and buy a Tedesco, or why we've got a Joseph Manu, or those sort of players. You want to buy those guys. But then on the other side, those players that you can have those conversations with about what should we do, or you want someone that's going to stand next to you in a trench, that feeling of that. You've got to buy character as well. And that's where the test is. How do you marry up the talent and character in your recruitment, and how do you get it right when they're 17 or 16? And so that's that constant mix between talent and character. And I feel like over the years we've worked our way into combining the two.
Sometimes you can have too much character and too much talent. You've got to get the right levels. Yeah,
you got to know who you are as well. Like the Roosters, we would recruit differently to Manly or Penrith or Brisbane. Subtly, slightly different, because there's DNA in our jersey. We've been around for over 100 years. There were certain ways that have been passed on, whether we know it or not, from the original teams. The Daly Messenger was the original player, the reason rugby league was invented, and he was a Rooster. And Daly, he was one of the original superstars. So that's in our DNA. So we've got to continue to offer that. So we don't run away from the talented player. We go searching for that. But the character that we've also played with has been very strong in our time. So we've got to look for those players that embody the East, that hard-working area. Everyone looks at the sparkly, a bit like your life. People see Mark Bouris now and look up with admiration, but they don't see the hard work and the grind and all of that went towards it, right? But the board members of our team are exactly like our team. The area that we represent is Mark Bouris, is Nick Politis. That's what I love about our place. We were the rejects. That's where they went and lived. They went and lived in Paddington. They went and lived in Darlinghurst. They went and lived in Bondi. That's our area. That's what rugby league was built on. Everyone moved to the North Shore. That was where the fertile land was, or out to Haberfield. They all moved them out there. All the slums, all the migrants came into our area.
Yeah.
And we built. And we worked hard for this. We lived through that. Our footy players, our jersey lived through that time. And now we've got the rewards. We represent the Roosters area. We love the area because we fought for it and we've worked hard for it. But we roll up our sleeves and we wear the suit at the end of the day. That's our area. And there's no difference to the players that we want to recruit. That's who we look for. Players that are going to shine and they're going to express themselves and play their footy, but they're going to roll up their sleeves for their mate and they're going to work hard. So that's our recruitment.
That's a great answer, actually. It made the hairs on my neck stand up. Actually, I felt really proud of our club for that when you were telling me that. And I guess on the flip side of that, as I asked John Kavanagh this question the other day about Conor McGregor, how do you run a club when you've got some players in there who are like, superstars, Teddy, but there's a whole stack of them in our club, but you've got young guys coming through, or you've got your workers, you got to have the stable workers, the guys who are your warriors, the guys who, just never let you down, just do tackle after tackle after tackle, and we're talking about.
Yep.
How do you balance the dynamics in the organisation? I mean, how do you go about that? Or is it not a problem? Maybe the so-called superstars, they're just like normal blokes anyway.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we often say is that no one's better than anybody else. That's a philosophy in life, I think, is I don't care whether you've got, lots of money or no money, went to a certain school or not, you're really talented at football or not. Everybody's the same.
That's what you believe, but how do you
that's the stuff that we talk to the guys about, that, teaching them that everyone's on their own path. So we believe in two things, and we try and pass this on. It doesn't mean they always believe that, but most of them do. They like the fact that you can walk in the doors and there's not a hierarchy. If you walk in the doors of the Roosters, they don't feel like, externally, I think they think there is, but when you walk in the doors, everyone's the same, whether it's Kel at the front desk, Kath upstairs, the new person in membership, the new player that walks in, or the Boyd Cordner at the top, or Jake Friend. There's no difference. We're all equal and we treat each other the same, but life is survival of the fittest. Darwin was right. You've got to fight for what you want. Doesn't mean that anybody's better than anyone else, but if you want something out of life, you better fight for it. And there's no difference in sport for us. Treat everybody equally, but we're going to fight for what we want as a footy team and as a club.
But they're high intellectual theses. I mean, those things are. I mean, so we're talking about young men. I might know those things now, but I didn't know those things when I was 18. I mean, particularly given coming out of school and stuff like that. Do you actually sit down with them and talk to them about these things, or is it just a matter of them seeing the other senior players acting that way, or is it a combination of those things?
Well, the most important teachers are the senior players. So I think everyone has a code of honour that they, in any environment that they walk to. Some are better than others, but places that have endured through time have a really strong code. Sometimes it was written down, sometimes it's not. we don't write it down. We expect people to walk it. And the beauty of our place is I feel really strong that a lot of our leaders have walked it for a long period of time, and they're still here. So they're the ones that pass it on. The senior players, people think that a coach is really important. Captains are more important than coaches. Senior players that have delivered and stand next to the young guys, they're the most important. They're the ones that really get the best out of the club. And we've been really lucky since I've been here with, Minnie, Jake, Mitchell Pearce, Boyd Cordner, those sort of guys. And then we've got forming the Kearys and the Tedescos. I feel like they're becoming great leaders because they walk 24/7 in a certain way, and they're trying to head towards being great players and great person at the same time. So trying to do that. So the players are the best teachers, but then when I first started, all you're doing is coaching attack and defence, and you're trying to do that well, and you're a bit scared to open up what you think or things that you think have helped you as a young guy to players, because rugby league culture is not that place. It's, keep that softer side to yourself. This is a man's game. So, and so it took a couple of years to start. I feel like we tried to teach them in the right way, but we're doing a lot more now that, we openly have sessions that are not about footy. Once a week, we'd have sessions that are not to do with footy at all.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so, it's one of the... If everybody in their life read the poem If by Rudyard Kipling, that would be... Everybody should read that poem. It's an amazing piece to read, and it's got so many lessons in all of that, but you wouldn't think that a footy team's going to read a poem. But the boys will sit there and then they'll... Okay, pick out the first verse. What do you love out of the first verse? What do you love out of the second? What does that mean to you? Yeah, and that, just even them when they talk about the unforgiving minute. If you ask Jake Friend, I remember him vividly talking about what the unforgiving minute meant for him. That's a whole life lesson just in listening to that. If we understood what an unforgiving minute is, that's how to run into life, not walk through it. That's a really important lesson. So those I really enjoy that, but I felt more open to do that because the players we're just closer. They'll think that I'm sometimes gone too far, but they'll allow me to open them up to something. They don't have to learn anything. It's more offering something without judgment. Here's a podcast. Listen to this podcast on basketball, or we'll read a book. And go through the book and go, okay, A Man's Search for Meaning. If anybody's going to read a book of Viktor Frankl, so the boys will read the book. We'll sort of go and buy, 45 odd books and hand it out and get them to read it.
And Viktor Frankl's whole thing was about your purpose and why, the whole why, as opposed to what or how, but it's always about why.
Yep.
And Jack Gibson, you knew Jack, but I was around Jack for a long time there, quite close to him, and Jack was a big... Actually, at Christmas time, Jack used to give all his friends a book, and he'd go and choose the book at a second-hand bookstore. And on a couple of occasions, he gave me a book for Christmas, and the books he gave me were very thoughtful, and actually I went and read the books that he gave me. And what you're doing is sort of to me, it sounds like a modern version of what the great so-called Supercoach Jack Gibson did, is bringing thoughtfulness into the environment, thinking about things other than footy. And thoughtfulness is, I think, teaching players or people or young men to be thoughtful as opposed to just skilling them up is a great thing.
Because this is a hard part, because in the end, you're just a footy coach, right? You just got to go out there and coach footy. There is, in the end, because you're also playing... We want to be brutal in the way that we play. We don't want to play soft. This is not... There was a great story about one of the warriors from Troy, right, when he was fighting the Greeks. And they lost. But his thing was, how could he spill blood in the morning and carry his baby in the afternoon? And that's a snapshot of what life should look like for a footy player as well. Like, how do you spill blood on on the weekend, because that's what they're there for. We're there for entertainment. People want to watch that. They want to see the traits that they aspire to have or that they do have, but they want to see character on a footy field. They want to see talent, but they want to watch a guy that's why Boyd Cordner is revered, is because he played with the character that a lot of us would love to have in us. And he showed that every single weekend. Jake Friend's the same. But then how do you carry your baby in the afternoon? How do you walk off that field and be a good man, be a good partner, a good father, a good, that's what life should be like. And so trying to mix those two together is really key.
So do you think, is that what you think your job description is, though, is to guide them or influence them? Which one do you want to do?
Guide. I think influence for me probably means there's a second motive out of what I'm trying to do there. I'm trying to get an end result, because this has taken a bit of thought in, like, my job's to win footy games. I'm really clear that my job at the Roosters is to win footy games and win premierships. That's really clear. Do it in the right way, but that's my job.
The bloke in a bar, the Instagram, he actually put up a post today. It says, "At the Roosters, we're here to win premierships."
Yeah.
That was actually put up today, funnily enough.
Right.
You should say that, yeah.
And we are. You can say, "Oh no, my job's to form really good people, and if we win," no. We want to win. Like, we're not here to make up the numbers or to be a really nice club. We want to win premierships, and we're going to go after that. But we're also going to do it in a way where we're progressing the person as well. We want to have great men. We want to do it with integrity, and we want to be absolutely brutal and beautiful when we go out to play. So how are we going to do all that? Okay, now start trying to.
There's a mission.
Plan the season. That's you start with that. It's a second thought now. It's not even you don't have to think about that. That is very clear in our ethos at the Roosters, and then we go about trying to set all that up. And there's lots of people that are involved in that.
Well, you've got a great team. And it's taken time to build that team.
Yeah.
I don't mean a football team, a team of management team, the team who look after the players and the coaching, your staffing squad.
Yeah.
Let's call it that. And what's interesting about that squad too is, when I'm just thinking about it, as you were talking to me earlier on, they're all pretty much similar sort of people in terms of the way they think. They're broader thinkers than just, we're into the footy, let's get into tackle. And like Fitzy. Fitzy's got a good head on him, and he's got a good brain. He thinks broad. He's got a lot of experiences in life too.
Yep.
And same as Matty King, for example.
Yep.
They're good people as well as being tough mothers on the field and like relentless players.
Well, it's easy for me as a guy that didn't play and didn't make it to come up with these things. But when a guy like Fitzy, the way that he played, and he was, he was a man's man. That's what.
Yeah, he was a Boyd Cordner style player.
Yeah. That he was, Freddie will openly talk about that. Freddie got to do what he wanted to do because Fitz would do all the other stuff.
Yeah,
and he was the ultimate right hand man. But then he's open to all this stuff. He's like we all are. We're all on our own search, but he knows it's our role to offer up different thoughts and experiences to these guys. And so Fitzy's been, the ultimate guy for me.
If I go back to when, you were a young man, a young fellow at school, and you saw your dad trying all these different things. One of the things I know about you, not intimately, but I know this about you, is that you're always open to exploring different ideas. I often send you notes and say, "Mate, I read this, or I saw this about mathematics of soccer fields," and generally speaking, it's rare that you ever say, "Oh no, I've never heard of that." You've already probably heard of it, but you're always exploring these things. Is that an influence your dad has put to you or brought to you from those days today, and as that drives you to chase your own things of interest, your own curiosities? Because it seems to me you're going to influence the players that way too, because the players are going to see their coach looking at all these different curiosities, and may well be that they're going to have those influences on them too when they get older.
Yeah, because that's an interesting one. There are no limitations on what you can research and get into. Like, be curious.
Yeah.
Go and find some stuff out that you don't know, and
totally.
learn some bits. But that, so how do you be consistent? How do you be consistent in your character and disciplined, but be constantly moving?
That sounds like to me, that sounds like a combination of your mum and your dad.
Yeah.
It
is.
That's what I'm thinking to myself. It's like you've distilled this. You describe your mother and your father. Looks like you've distilled the two best things out of them, and put it to work in your own life. That's my gut feeling. That's how it feels.
Yeah, I think I said you spend so many times trying to not be certain things, but there's some amazing things that they opened up to me that has created interest. And then there comes the question: is how do you, you just can't, how do you keep it simple for the players that
they're immature for a start.
Yeah, they're young. Like if I talk to I guess I was talking to myself in a certain way there, but my job is to go out. I'm trying to earn for my family and go out and play well on the weekend so I can set up my life.
Yeah.
I don't need to be complicated with stuff that the journey that a 43-year-old's on, And so that's that balance between how do you offer them different experiences but allow them to be simple in their mindset.
And how do you think they get it? I mean, you get feedback from them? Do they give you feedback, or are you just things you observe?
Yeah, definitely. I'll have guys, I'll talk to Fitzy about, hey, you need to let me know when I'm gone too far. Like if am I going too far out there? And then there's players that, like Boyd's one that I would constantly get feedback from. Jake, Mitch Orbo was a really good one for me. Now Luke Keary and Tedesco are really important. They're growing into that. I go to them often for stuff. Victor Radley will tell me what's he's thinking, even if I don't ask him. So they're the ones that you'll often see it. And then my job's to look into their eyes and see what they're thinking as well. And sometimes I go, they're not here with me, where I need to pull back from this, or.
I'll give you some feedback, because I bumped into Rads and Teddy the other day, last weekend, and they both said to me they quite enjoyed the whole spiritual discussion, the Tai Chi.
Yep.
That discussion around your energy, and also harnessing it, or understanding it, then harnessing it and managing it. So you might have thought that they thought you'd be crazy, but those two at least have said that they thought it was pretty cool.
Well, they
didn't quite understand it. They said, but
but
that's a good thing to admit.
Well, how do you go to your edges? How do you push into the edges of the corners where the dark areas are?
Without getting too frightened.
Yeah,
without it can get scary down there.
Without ruining the footy. In the end, this is the thing. Again, at the end of every week, you've got to simply go out and perform. Don't cloud the mind with lots of thought. Go out and deliver and play a great brand of footy. So that's constantly the balance. But I guess I felt more comfortable over the years to go there with them. And we trust each other now. We're really close. It's hard to say that you think that you coach-player relationship, but in the end, we're in the one family, and you got to lean on each other. And this is not this coach telling them what to do. I lean on them a lot. They give me so much feedback that it allows me to coach them better, and but I need them.
Well, does that take away from you the ability, trusting each other? That's an important thing. But does that take away from you sometimes the ability where you need to provide theatre at half time because they're just playing like shit and they just need to get a good kick up the arse? Or is that something where you never go? You just don't go down that territory?
No, I do. You have to be brutally honest with them, because that's.
But can you be brutally honest? Yes, but because people do some business all the time. Brutally honest with a bit of theatre though. I'm talking about what the fuck are you doing? You guys, blah blah blah.
No, that's not. That's not me.
You.
That's not being all That's not the real me. So I'm not gonna put that on. I'll put theatre on when I'm passionate about something. And that if I want to, pre-game, before game, the day before, is where I feel like you set that stuff up, the days leading up to it. So I'll be, use tone and the energy in a room a lot to get that going. But I won't do something if it's not going to work. Like I won't, at half time, I'm not going to do something that if I need, I will get into a player if I know that it's going to pull their strings. But I've stuffed up at different times where I've tried to create that and it wasn't right for that player. It's because my emotion was I wanted to do it, but they weren't going to hear it in the right way.
Yeah, yeah. And they can actually work the other way. They can go against you.
But there are some times where you go, there is nothing technical here. I'm going to need to create the energy for the second half. So you need to get, it's not, but that's real. That's the real part. I won't try and make something up and yell at them, but I'll try and create a positivity through clicking them into some, because they need to get out of the space that they're in. I need to give them a talk or inspire them in some way to click back into how we want them to play, or to get out of their own minds mostly. If you're in half time and they're not playing well, it's because they're thinking too much. You know, they're usually overthinking how they're playing. You need to get them out of that.
I was just thinking as you were talking to me there, I remember beginning of last year, pre-COVID of course, you had a big theme about our history and Australian history, and you took our team to various places overseas to sort of reiterate the history of Australians, and it was a sort of a theme that you were running with. That was last year, wasn't it? I'm not getting confused with the year before. Yes,
that was our theme for 19.
19, right.
Yep.
And then 20 you had a theme?
Yep.
Beginning of 20. What was the 20 theme? Pre-COVID, of course.
Yeah, we have a club theme and a team theme. And the club was around Sydney in the Opera House. That was a club theme of just about, dream the impossible. It's in their DNA. That was the Opera House theme. So that was very much about creating something that was impossible when someone started, because we were chasing 3. That was what we wanted. But the team theme was around Barcelona. That's why we went to Barcelona and the way that they played, and especially 2008 to 2012, the Pep Guardiola years, when Messi and Xavi and all those players were there. So we drew a lot on there. They accelerated the game of football through the way that they played.
And what about 21? What are we doing for a theme this year? Is it
that's
you allowed to talk about it?
No.
Or you don't want to talk about it? Fair enough.
No, well,
no, it's okay.
The reason, because
no, fuck him. We're not going to tell anybody.
No,
because no, I agree with you. No, I'm on your side. So you just mentioned someone really important to me, and I did want to raise him. You said Messi. You talked about Messi, and the soccer player, the football player, and of course, you got teams like everybody wants to play for Barcelona or Real Madrid or one of them. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're in the English league or whatever. There's a magic there, right? I don't follow soccer so much, but I do during World Cups and etc. And Messi being one of the most famous of all time. We were talking earlier on about players that we've known and who have seemed to have all the time in the world on the football field. Joey, Freddie, but there's a stack of them anyway. And Cooper Cronkaway seemed like he had a lot of time, more time than anybody else. So Cameron Smith does. And we were talking about this process of observing and participation and just maintaining your position. And I mean, I'd like you to explain what your views on why those great players tend to have more time than everybody else. Why is it because we always say, everyone's hanging off him. They're not going to tackle him. He's got funnel webs on him. That's all that bullshit stuff that people talk about. But what is it you think in terms of the way those individuals are?
Well, Cooper is a great example. Goes back to my point. Remember I said that players are the most important, or your captains are your most important? We can be as good as what we want. We can have an amazing year, and I can have my best coaching year and not win. But you can go, bringing in a leader like Cooper, it changed the way that the last few years have been, and the way that we feel like we were ripe there, but we needed a captain. I'm not talking about the Boyd Cordner or the Jake Friend, but we needed a captain on the field. Like a game manager.
A manager on the field.
And that shows the importance, and people can talk about, how important a coach is or whatever, but the guys on the field, those leaders on the field, they're the ones, the ones that you talked about, your Freddie and your Joey and your Alfie Langers and Cooper Cronks. And Cooper, we all know he didn't have the talent. This is where people find it hard to put Cooper into but he wasn't pretty. That talent and character one that I talked about? People didn't look at Cooper and see talent. He wasn't pretty to watch. He didn't run beautifully, and he didn't have this beautiful pass that cut out 3 guys and hit the winger, and he just wasn't. So people couldn't put him in this box of legendary, but they couldn't understand that his character on the football field was second to none. The way that he acted when it did not matter if we would sit in a video room and he would say, "This is how I would play at this moment," or he would say, "This is how I'm going to start the game," and then at the end of the game, "This is how we want to run it home." And then he'd get into it. He'd make 20 tackles. His heart rate would be at 180, and he'd make the decision he decided when his heart rate was at 60. Now, talk about sport, but talk about business. Talk about the pressure of, you're about to lose your house and you've got to make a business decision. Well, Cooper Cronk in those situations would make the same decision as if he was in a vacuum and it was the simplest decision he had to make. He constantly made those decisions, I think, more than any other player in the game. And Cameron Smith, I would put in that category as well. Cameron and Cooper were incredible at being able to make the decisions, whether sitting in a video room or at 180 beats per minute. That was legendary.
And then people in business, there's a lot to be learned by people in business out of that. And that's a process of being able to step back away from what you're doing, get out of the wrestle, stop wrestling in the mud, step back, sort of within yourself, in a funny sort of ways. You've got to step back and actually have a look, what have I got to do now? And take a breath.
Yeah.
Actually about breathing, which is some of the things
Definitely.
that you do. Breathing, I don't mean that, as well as actually let your brain breathe for a second and just think about, you've got plenty of time. Think about what it is you've got to do. And that occurs in business all the time. Too many of us actually make quick snap decisions. This business, a fast decision is a good decision. I don't believe that. I think a well thought out decision is better. Not overthinking it, don't get me wrong, but thinking it clearly. You've got to be clear in your thinking as opposed to just rushing into it. And,
well, there's the simple thing about what Rads and Teddy were talking about. They're liking it. But all we're doing is that space where you can step back, observe yourself. It's like that's why we do that when we talk about it, because often it's like you're stepping behind yourself, observing yourself, and then everything else around you. And that's your ability to step back, observe, and then go and act.
Yeah, it's quite powerful. And that's why these guys are so bloody good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, your wrestling coach, who I've been doing a bit of wrestling with lately, Larry Papadopoulos, he's always talking to me about creating space.
Yeah.
When someone's getting on top of you. And creating space is about having the ability to have a look what you've got to do.
Yeah.
You can't do it if you're all over them and they're all over you. You've got to sort of create some space. And it's funny that
whilst you're about to get choked.
Yeah. But if you can get some space, you've got a chance.
Yep.
If you've got no space, you've got no chance.
Yep.
So he said, at the end of the day, it's better to be 5 meters away from someone and run.
Yep.
That's your best chance. That's your best space.
Yep.
The more space you get, the better.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting for someone like him, who's a wrestling champion or a fighting champion for that matter. And these guys you're talking about, like the Cooper Cronks and that, they have this ability to create some space in their brain, intellectually.
Yep.
They build space.
I learned so much watching Cooper, and then Luke Keary and I talked only about it yesterday, just about the lessons we learnt from Cooper, and then how do we move forward even with himself and the other halves. And Luke, he's ready for all that as well. But that's, they're our best teachers. It keeps going back to the senior players are the best teachers. They're the ones that show you how it's done. And Cooper, it's hard to explain how special his decision-making talent was. People sort of saw the result, but they were looking for a physical talent that he didn't have.
But he had another talent.
But the decision-making one is...
That's an important talent in making up your team.
Yep.
Robbo, this has been fantastic. Time is up. I really enjoyed this.
It's been
maybe
great.
Maybe some other time next year or something like that. Let's sit and have another crack at it and see what we've both learned and found out,
Yeah.
what we both experienced in the last 12 months. I really enjoy this. I hope our listeners have enjoyed this. I've got 2 listeners sitting up there behind the cameras. You've had them captured. They haven't moved. Both of them have been listening to every word. So that's usually a good test. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Mate, really enjoyed it. Thanks, mate.